Those of you who are young and have little ones at home, I trust everything is going well. That your husband is taking, or someone else is taking very good care of those little kitties for you. It's a real privilege again to be here. And wasn't the worship really great? Again, those words, you don't need a speaker, just sing, and really concentrate on those words. This "Not for a Moment," I'd only sung it a couple times, but I loved the words. When I asked Rachel, I said, I just love those words. It says, after all, you are constant. After all, you are only good. After all, you are sovereign. Not for a moment will you forsake me. And it doesn't matter. It says, in every step, every breath, you are there. Every tear, every cry, every prayer, in my hurt, at my worst. When my world falls down, not for a moment will you forsake me. And then we went into, it is well with my soul. Whoa. We sang it. And gals, it was neat in our breakout groups. Sometimes when you're come upon a detour, we don't know why. On those detours in the roads, they take you around and you wonder, is it because there's an accident there? Or are they working on the road? Or do they just want to take you there because they think it's scenic? You don't know. And you may never find out. When I told you about our time in Cleveland, we stopped at a rest area, probably 100 miles past. And I looked at a newspaper, and there it was on the front page that the day before a truck had too much on top, and he smashed into the pedestrian bridge that would cross 90. So down the bridge came. So there was no way you could get through. That's why all of a sudden, bingo, there you were, off of that road. And I thought, that's good to know why that happened. We were traveling again in the night. It was like 1 a.m, coming back from Michigan to go back to New York for Thanksgiving. All of a sudden, it was 1 a.m. Here's this policeman. We came around the bend on Route 86, which is a 4-lane highway, and he's there. Bingo, off you go. Here you're traveling, no warning that he's there, and you're traveling at 65 miles an hour or 72. Our son-in-law is a policeman, so we kind of asked him, how fast can you go before you get picked up? And he said, usually we don't pick you up if you're going 7 miles, but if you go beyond that, then we may pick you up. So Len sets the cruise at 7 and above, So anyway, there we were, bingo, off we went. We wondered, wow, what's going on? Pitch black, dark, you never know sometimes. We're on detours and we don't know why. And some of you are here facing detours that only you know about, God knows about. Could be related to a relationship, health, job, finances, any one of those things. And here we go, we're on the detour. And it doesn't matter what detour it is or how difficult it is, God still wants us to respond correctly. And we have his word to draw on. Just like last night, I hope dug her heels in. She grumbled. She was complaining when we got picked up and moved out. God knew why. God knew why. But he wanted us to respond and cultivate that heart of gratitude. Heart of gratitude, no matter what. Like we said, the Bible says, in everything, give thanks. And that's tough. I know it's tough. Today we're looking at our second response. We're going to turn to the book of Philippians. Philippians 2. We're going to read a couple verses that we read last night. Philippians 2, 14 and 15. Do all things. It doesn't say some things. It says do all things without grumbling or disputing, that you may prove yourselves to be blameless and innocent, children of God above reproach, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you appear as lights in the world. Skip over to chapter 4, verses 1 and 2. Therefore, my beloved brethren, whom I long to see, my joy and my crown. Isn't that neat? Somebody write that to you, you know? He says, Paul says, so stand firm in the Lord, my beloved. Now, I urge Euodia and I urge Syntyche to live in harmony in the Lord. So there was a little bit of discord. Something was going on. Bible doesn't tell us what it is, but these two ladies were having some difficulty. Now, my husband has renamed those ladies. He calls them Eurodius and Soon-Touchy. That's what he calls it. To live in harmony in the Lord. Sometimes our detours come. Maybe they come as a result of conflict. Maybe conflict arises because of the detour. But God calls us to resolve our conflicts in a biblical manner. Where is your conflict taking you? You know, it's not if conflict comes, but when. Len and I have done a lot of premarital counseling. We had the joy of doing premarital counseling for all our kids. And we told them, it's not if it comes, but when. It's going to come. Len and I have the privilege of being trained by peacemakers. And that's part of our story from leaving Romulus, getting to Syracuse, which I'm going to share with you. But we have a passion to share it with anyone who we can. So in our interims, that's one of the things we do is we hold what we're teaching, what I'm teaching to you in about an hour, we teach in 5 hours in a Saturday seminar. So you're getting a condensed version, way condensed. But we have a heart for that. Because you look at our churches, you look at our families, there is conflict. And we don't know how to resolve it. So we lash out, we run, we fight, we dig our heels in because we don't know how to resolve conflict in a biblical manner. Now on your table, everybody should grab one of these. It's a Peacemaker pamphlet. And I have extra if you want them. I keep this baby in my Bible. I actually have 2. And we're going to be referring to it. Most of what I'm talking about is in your notes, but this is your second Bible. Let me put it that way, okay? Or your third, whatever. But where is your conflict taking you? Here are some things we often hear. I hate it when we fight. It's not my fault. Just leave me alone. Maybe you've said these or had them said to you. I can't believe she said that about me. Fine, we'll do it your way. Just admit it. You're wrong. It's nothing. I'm fine, I guess. Oh, girls, we're good at that one. Your husband. Oh, what's wrong? Nothing. We're good at lying. I guess I'm going to say it straight up, but you hurt me. Well, it's not my problem. Ooh, Len and I were good at that one. I can't take it anymore. I'm leaving. So where is your conflict taking you? I would like you to open your pamphlet just to where you see the coffee cup. Just open it in the middle like this, like the book. Do you see the coffee cup? and it says the Peacemaker Pledge. I want to read this. A commitment to biblical conflict resolution. As people reconciled to God by the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, we were singing it as well with my soul, and the tears started flowing when it said that our sin, not in part, but the whole, was nailed to the cross. And I got thinking, that's never struck me like it did this morning. You know, it's not like, okay, this sin was nailed there, but this one wasn't. So I got to work on this thing. No, the whole bunch was nailed. The whole thing was nailed to the cross. So once I confess that thing, you know, God forgives me, and I can walk out with a clean slate. I can go forward. The whole thing was nailed to the cross. We believe that we are called to respond to conflict in a way that is remarkably different from the way the world deals with conflict. We also believe, here's important, that conflict provides opportunities to glorify God, serve other people, and grow to be like Christ. Therefore, in response to God's love and in reliance on His grace, we commit ourselves to responding to conflict according to the following principles. 3 things. Conflict provides 3 opportunities. Have you ever thought about that? First one, glorify God. Serve other people. Grow to be like Christ. Did you ever think of your conflict in that way? I never had. Same thing in the detours of life. Those 3 principles are right there. God wants me to respond, glorify God. Is it an opportunity for me to serve other people? Is it an opportunity for me to grow to be like Christ? It sure is. 3 opportunities. Now, we're going to just briefly talk about the 4 G's of peacemaking. The first one, we've mentioned it, glorify God. My question, how can I please and honor God in this situation? When I'm in conflict, that's not the first thing that comes to my head. The first thing is, what can I say that I can show them that I'm right? That's usually what I'm thinking. Or that, man, you really hurt me. Do you know how much you hurt me? That's not my first reaction. How can I please and honor God in this situation? 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. We need to have a God focus. Nothing matters more to God than His own glory. He really wants His name to be honored and glorified when I'm in a conflict. So I need to obey Him and imitate Him by loving others, showing mercy, laying down rights. That's a big one. That's countercultural. Forgiving and loving sacrificially. That is not how the world says we should handle conflict. When conflict arises, we always have a choice. We can reach for the grenade or reach for the fire extinguisher. It's up to us. And let me tell you, my husband's very good at reaching for the fire extinguisher. His wife's got her hand on the grenade pile. I'm honest. He's first one. Bless his heart. The second G, get the log out of your eye. Now we all know how that verse is. You know, I think it's in Matthew, you know. How can you get that speck out of their eye when you got this big log hanging out of your eye? How can I show Jesus' work in me by taking responsibility for my contribution to the conflict? Very important. My contribution to the conflict. Now, a rule to live by. You should have it in your notes, I hope. Are we following with me? Yes. Even if you are only responsible for 2% of the conflict. Are you guys with me? I see you.
Yes. Page 11.
Page 11. Okay. Okay, a rule to live by. Even if you are only responsible for 2% of a conflict, you're 100% responsible for that 2%. You get that? Yeah. We often think, well, I only did this. It's just a little tiny bit. So I don't have to do anything. They did 90%, or they did 95%. Look at what they did. That's exactly where Len and Hope were when they left Seneca Community Church and moved to Syracuse. Getting to the heart of the conflict, start with a log hunt. Honestly reflect on feedback you've received from the other person. Put yourself in their shoes. Could there be some truth to what they say? That's very humbling. When the Lord took us out of Romulus, New York, Seneca Community Church, we'd been there for almost 21 years. The church was 65 when we went and grew to about 250. And the Lord moved us. That began a 5-year detour. As I shared yesterday, Hope went with her heels dug in. I can remember, Len and I looked back and said, this wasn't too smart, but this is what we did. We ended on January 31st and started in Syracuse on February 1st. The first Sunday, we were still living in our home in Romulus because I hadn't sold yet. Instead of turning left out of our driveway to go to Seneca Community Church, we turned right out of our driveway to go to Syracuse, which was about an hour drive. It was the quietest hour Len and I have ever had. It felt so strange. We were there 3 years when we were introduced to peacemakers. Now, mind you, here I am, there to blame. I'm not. We faced something very difficult in that church about 3 years before the Lord moved us. And I'll share more of my personal journey with that in our next session. It was very painful, but you could see that things started to go downhill from there. So these people are to blame. Why I can't stay here. So we were there 3 years. We worked hard in this small church, and we went to a conference and Peacemakers was introduced. I thought, whoa, Len, we should go to that training. That would be good for us. Not thinking good for us personally, but good for us, another tool to have in our belt to share, That's what my mind focus was. Well, this would be good. We could share it at the church. This would be really good, Len. So we signed up for the course, and we had pre-course work to do. And one of the books that was here on peacemaking, we had to read that, plus do online stuff. So Len was doing his, I was doing mine, and one morning we got together and I said to Len, Len, I think we need to go back to Seneca Community Church and right some wrongs as best we can. He said, Hope, I was thinking the same thing. And these are the couples I think we need to see. I said, I think you're right. God was working. Took him 3 years. So we contacted their interim, who was with Interim Pastor Ministries. So that's how we found out about Interim Pastor Ministries. And said, would you be willing to moderate for us? He said, yes, he would. So we wrote to the 3 couples and asked them, would you be willing to meet with us? They all 3 said, yes, they would. We met with them individually. We needed to get the log out of our eye. We needed to take responsibility for our part of the conflict. Maybe it was only 2%. I don't know. Who knows? Could have been a whole lot more. But we were not willing to take responsibility for that. God had to get us out of there, pluck us over here, wait 3 years, then we were ready. Len and I will talk. We didn't go to Trinity Baptist Church in Syracuse to help them. We went there so God could help us and get our attention. That was a painful process. We met with those 3 couples. That didn't go. We did not have any hidden agenda. We went to confess our part of the conflict. With one of the couples, reconciliation was established. They recognized their part. We have great fellowship today. The other 2 couples, I'll never forget, one of them said, "Well, Len, I sure hope you've learned something." Now, Len and I, when we're in a difficult situation, I'll sit next to Len, and I have my hand on his knee, because I can tell when Len's getting a little irritated. And he doesn't think he's irritated, but I can tell, his body, he kind of comes up. And so I'll just gently squeeze his knee, and down he goes. So we have that little signal. So Len was sitting next to me. I had my hand on his knee. He had his hand on my knee, which was really good. Because when this guy said that, I came right up out of my seat. And I wanted to reach right over and choke the guy. Len squeezed my knee. I sat right back down. We had no hidden agenda. We didn't want a hidden agenda. We just wanted to go and do our part. 2 of the couples, I can see them now. I don't have bitterness. I was holding a grudge. The Lord showed me I was holding a grudge when I confessed the grudge. A weight was lifted off. It's God. It's in your hands. When they're ready to confess their part, we'll be ready. But we wanted to make sure that we had done our part. And that's what this is about. In a conflict, getting the log out of your eye. Recognizing your part of the conflict and going. It's not easy. I know it's not easy. But it's God honoring, and it gives you a peace and a freedom. And we're going to talk about in just a few minutes. Doesn't mean reconciliation has happened, but your heart is right with God. Now, conflicts are really driven by idols of the heart. Turn to James 4. James 4:1. What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you? Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members? You lust and do not have, so you commit murder. And you are envious and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. We have an idol in our heart. Usually, quarrels are driven by the idols we have in our heart. And you think, well, I don't think I do. Well, we just might. Look in your notes. Slippery slope of idolatry. We start out with a desire. I would really like to have. Nothing wrong. I'd really like to have a new car. Nothing wrong with that. The next vehicle we get, what I'd like to have? Is a sunroof or a moonroof, whatever you call it. I said, Lord, I'd just love to have that. Don't ask me why. I think it's because I always wanted a convertible. And that's kind of close when you get to be my age. I said, oh, and Len really wants heated seats. I don't know, that's what we'd like to have. Are we going to get it? I don't know. But, it's fun to, I'd really like a new stove or whatever. I'd like my kids to behave more. I'd like them not to fight so much. Rachel and her youngest sister, that was one we talked about a lot, But the desire, I'd really like to have. Nothing wrong. Here we go. When it turns to a demand, I must have, then we're heading down a slippery slope, and it's becoming an idol. When we go for that next car, and I tell them, well, I must have that sunroof. Then it's changed. Then it comes to an expectation. You will give me. Len, if you really love me, you will see that we have that sunroof. Disappointment, we don't get one. You did not give me my desires. Judgment, well, because you didn't give me my desires, you fill it in, girls. What do we often say? Well, you don't really love me. Then punishment. Because you didn't, I will give you the cold shoulder for the next 3 months. That's where that comes into, like, oh, what's wrong, Hope? Nothing. Now let me share you a story. Poor Len, he's not here to defend himself, but I defend him. It's not his fault. We were in Syracuse, and we had a new couple come to the church, and so one Sunday we had them over for dinner. Now, every time we have company for dinner, Len always gets up after the meal, helps me clear the table, get the dessert and the coffee on. Always. This time he didn't. And the guy was sharing a funny story, and I could sort of hear it, but I started clearing the table. I thought, okay, Len, come on, let's go. And I'm in the kitchen, kind of beginning to stew a little bit. Desire. I really wanted Len to help me. Nothing wrong with that desire. But in my mind, I was heading down that slippery slope just like that. So I went out, got a few more things. He's still sitting there. I clanged the dishes a little bit, but not too loud, because I didn't want the company to think something's wrong, But I thought maybe Len might know something's wrong, I came back in and said, well, what kind of coffee would you guys like? Brought the dessert, all that. Disappointment, judgment. I was down that slippery slope in 5 minutes. That desire to have Len help me became an idol of the heart, just like that. We had a meeting that night at church. He knew something wasn't right. Oh, well, Hope, you seem kind of quiet. Is everything okay? Yep. I don't think so. Fine, just fine. Yeah, what was I doing? Punishment. Because you didn't, I'm not going to even tell you what's wrong. You ought to be able to figure that out yourself. What a sinful wife he had. But do you see how quickly a desire can turn to an idol before you even know it? And, actually, I knew it was going, and I just let it go. That's not good. So, I eventually talked to Len, confessed it all out. And he said, honey, I don't know why I just didn't. I said, it's no big deal. It was a big deal to me, and it was stupid. But I said, it'll make a great illustration when it comes to being idols of the heart. Now, I was teaching this at Forest Springs Camp and Conference Center at a ladies' retreat in Wisconsin. I had to laugh. This one lady way in the back said, well, why didn't you just ask him? I said, I don't know why. I didn't, Yeah, it's kind of stupid, the whole thing. But it can turn that quickly. That's my point. Now, two key questions to ask ourselves. Am I willing to sin to get what I want? Or do I respond sinfully when I don't get what I want? If you want to know if a desire has become an idol, answer those questions. The second one for me was a yes. Do I respond sinfully when I don't get what I want? You know that 2-year-old in the grocery store throwing a temper tantrum? Why is he doing that? Because he wants what he wants. It's become an idol very quickly. Same thing with us. We just throw them in different ways. We're more cultured. But on the inside, I was throwing a major temper tantrum. I was sinning. I was responding sinfully. Now, it's very important when we go to confess that we make a good confession. Very important. The 7 A's of confession address everyone involved. Everyone that's part of the conflict we need to address. And again, I cite Len. Len's so good at this. He's a pastor. Pastors will make blunders in front of the congregation on a Sunday morning. The next Sunday morning, he's right up there saying, you know, what I said or what, you know, I'm sorry, that was wrong. He does it in front of the people that are involved in the conflict. Avoid if, but, and maybe. How many of you have heard, well, if I offended you, I'm sorry. Is that a confession? No. No. Well, I know I offended you, but do you know what you did to me? Is that a confession? No. And the word maybe, you know, well, I'm sorry, maybe I did something. Well, no. Start listening to public speakers and figures and sports people, their confessions. Oh, you hear that if all the time. All the time. It's no confession at all. We need to own it. We need to admit specifically. We need to acknowledge that we hurt the other person. We need to accept the consequences of our actions. We need to change our behavior. I needed to change my behavior with what I expected of Len. Then we need to ask for forgiveness. We went to those 3 couples and we didn't want to think like we had memorized this, but we had memorized this, you know. And that's what we did, is we just confessed our part, not expecting anything in return. And like I said, one couple responded beautifully. The other 2, not so much. But we win. The 3rd G is gently restore. How can I lovingly serve others by helping them take responsibility for their contribution to the conflict? You know, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but lots of times when we go and confess our part, then they most times readily will confess their part. Now, like I said, the 2 couples didn't. But we're ready. We have our feet at the line of reconciliation, so if and when they ever do, we're ready. Because we've taken care of our part. Then it's go and be reconciled. How can I demonstrate the forgiveness of God and encourage a reasonable solution to this conflict? Forgiveness has to be the hardest thing to unpack. Not easy. When you've been hurt, not easy. When we've hurt someone, we need to give them time. They may not be ready to step right in and say, oh yeah, I forgive you. It takes time. Being reconciled is the giving and receiving of true heart forgiveness. Being reconciled is that. We're going through this pretty quickly, but remember, we take care of our part. We get that log out. We go and we confess, and we do ask Him. We trust that you'll in time be able to forgive me. When they do, and they've confessed their part to you, that's when true reconciliation can happen. Now, unpacking forgiveness. Oh, let me read this. It should be the hallmark of the Christian life. We are the most forgiven people in the world. Therefore, we should be the most forgiving people of the world. We have been forgiven so much. Much, 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 much more than I'll ever have to forgive anybody. But we lose sight of that. I lost sight of that with these people back in Seneca Community Church. I lost sight of that. I had stood my ground. You've hurt me terribly. Not taking any part of my responsibility. I had forgotten how much God had forgiven me. What forgiveness is not? It's not a sentimental concept. We kind of think that way. It's not a feeling. It's not forgetting. It's not excusing, and it's not a temporary pardon. Now, we often think, man, and this is the way I felt, man, if I forgive that person, they're going to think they're off the hook. So I'm not going to. Nope, I had a wrong idea of forgiveness. What forgiveness is? Forgiveness is a decision modeled after God's forgiveness of us. A decision not to hold an offense against the offender. Whoa. That's tough. That's tough. Does God hold our offenses against us? No, He doesn't. He's not up there saying, well, Hope, I remember when you did this. And I'm just not sure I can forgive that. God doesn't do that. He sacrificed His Son, just like our song says, all of it is nailed to the cross. How dare you, Hope, hold an offense, this person's offense against you, against them? Are you mightier than God? Ooh. Hope had to be taken down a few pegs. It's a decision not to hold an offense against the offender. Ephesians 4:32. I'm sure this verse is familiar. You probably quoted it to your kids. We did. We had one of our girls, when we said, now remember Ephesians 4:32. I know it. Be ye kind one to another. Ooh. But here we go. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. Wow. Can you imagine? I don't know how many we are. Are we 60? And we really grasp how to resolve conflict in a biblical manner. And when you go back to Lifeline, you've got 60 ladies here that are going to stand firm, and we're not going to let conflict divide our church. Amen. That's right. More pastors leave ministry because of conflict. We're good at conflict. We don't want that to be a driving thing that divides our church and throws the pastors out. And I'm sure you've all heard of churches that split. Worst testimony you could have in a community. Because they couldn't get along? Because somebody likes decaf coffee more than regular coffee? Or I don't like drums? Most churches have conflicts over the nursery and the worship music. Yeah, used to be choirs, but we don't have as many choirs as we used to. Yeah. So sad. We need to learn to defer to each other. Not always have it my way. If I'm grumbling and I'm complaining, I better look at that slippery slope of idolatry when it comes to worship. You know, Pastor Brian's message last week was so good on worship. It's really not about music and the style. It's what's in here, in my heart. And you know, ladies, Len preaches this all the time. He'll tell people, hey, if you come to church ready to serve, my preaching may not be on target this Sunday, and the music may not be too good, and, you know, children's maybe, there may be some rustle and tussle in church, but if you come with a heart to serve, that doesn't matter. You walk away blessed. But if you're coming looking, okay, let's see what the worship is this time. Oh, let's see what my kid has to say about church. Come with a heart to worship or to serve. And you'll never walk out disappointed. And you'll be a blessing to your pastors. Go to Colossians, one of my favorite sections. Colossians 3:12. And so, as those who have been chosen of God, holy and beloved, put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Whoa. You know, when we shower in the morning, that should be our verse. Okay, Lord, here I go. I'm out of the shower. Help me to put on a heart of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Then it says, bearing with one another. You know, bearing with one another is, like maybe you have a right to say something, but you choose not to. You're going to bear with that person. Here we go. And forgiving each other. Whoever has a complaint against anyone, just as the Lord forgave you, so also should you. And beyond all these things, put on love, which is the perfect bond of unity. There we go. I have no excuse when it comes to forgiveness. Now, I love this little pause for thought. Unforgiveness is the poison we drink, hoping someone else will die. Isn't that the truth? That's where hope was. When we left, I was so ticked. I was not going to forgive them. And man, I was hoping God's wrath would come right on down. Yeah. Who did she think she was? God said, oh, okay, Hope, here we go. Here's a detour. We're moving you. You're not listening? You're not responding? Here we go. Out you go. And I'm going to leave you sit there for 3 years and work hard. Stew all you want. You know, sometimes God's silence is because he loves us. And when you're ready, Hope, you'll see. Forgiveness is a 2-stage process. There's a heart component. You know, Len and I, when we sat on our couch and said, we're going to get this right, we first had to confess it to God and say we were wrong for these years. There's a lot of years I'm talking about, girls. Because that happened 3 years before we moved, and here we are 3 years into this ministry. So that's 6 years of harboring a grudge. We had to confess that to God and seek His forgiveness first. Then there's the transactional component where we go to the person that offended us, and we did that. Is there true reconciliation? No, not yet. But Len and I are at the line of reconciliation. So when they confess, then we'll be right there. Can I see this person? Yes, I can. Can I hug her? Yes, I can. But I don't have a connection, deep connection with her. Not yet. And this other couple was very interesting. We were at the state fair, which is held in Syracuse. Huge. Imagine Utah. Does Utah have a state fair? It's a huge thing. Thousands of people, you know. Lots of buildings to walk in and out of. Oh my word. We're walking in one. This third couple's walking out the door. We'd already met. We could say, hey, good to see you. No bitterness on our part. Is there true reconciliation? No, not yet. But Len and I are not harboring that hurt and that bitterness. So we just keep praying. Yeah, reconciliation may come, and it may not. But our hearts are right with God. That's the biggest thing. The freedom that left my shoulders in the middle of the night when I realized what a grudge I was hanging on to. I can't tell you the freedom I had. Now, what does I forgive you really mean? It says, I promise I will not dwell on this incident. I promise I will not bring up this incident and use it against you. Girls, this is good for us who are privileged to have a husband. We're good at remembering. We got fantastic memories, don't we? 3 years ago when you did, no. You know, girls, if we don't get those things out and reconcile, they just keep building. Till something happens and whammo, the dam opens up and whew, the volcano goes and woo, because we haven't handled it 3 years ago. I promise I will not talk to others about this incident. Now, I'm here sharing what God did in my heart. That's why I'm talking about it. But I'm not going to you on a personal level and saying, now, do you really want to know what they did? We're good at going to someone else. Oh, we're real good at that. And we can clothe that any way we want to. Would you pray for me? Ooh. Yeah, we had a guy in our church back in Seneca Community Church. He's now with the Lord. Roger Nelson. He said, if you're not part of the problem or part of the solution, then you're gossipy. That person you're sharing with, if they're not part of the problem and they're not part of the solution, you're gossipy. Good to keep in mind. We need to learn how to handle our incidences. Then I promise I will not allow this incident to stand between us or hinder our personal relationship. That's what forgiveness is. It isn't saying, I forget it. It isn't excusing them. It's before God making a covenant. I'm not going to bring it up. When they seek forgiveness from me, this is what I'm promising to them. This is what I've promised to God, even though they haven't sought our forgiveness yet, but Len and I promised this before God. Detours can come with conflict. You may be on one right now. And I would encourage you to pray desperately about these principles. Again, it's in a nutshell. You know, there's a song that says, "Your grace finds me." Do you know that song? I just love those words. It says it's there in the newborn cry. It's there in the light of every sunrise. It's there in the shadows of this light, your great grace. It's there on the mountaintop. It's there in the everyday and the mundane, there in the sorrow and the dancing, your great grace. From the creation to the cross, then from the cross into eternity, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me. It's there on a wedding day, there in the weeping by the graveside, there in the very breath we breathe, your grace, great grace. Same for the rich and poor. Isn't that cool? Same for the saint and for the sinner. Enough for this whole wide world, your great grace. From the creation to the cross, then from the cross into eternity, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me. There in the darkest night of the soul, there in the sweetest songs of victory, your grace finds me. Yes, your grace finds me. I don't know where you're at, but God's grace is there. I don't know if you're in a conflict, but you're going to be in one sometime. His grace is right there to walk you through the steps of healing and of redemption and for whatever you need. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much for your word.